After spending my savings to save her life, my wife abandoned me, and my daughter backed her up. What I did next taught them in the most forceful way possible the price of betraying the one who was always there. I am 47 years old and have been married to Eleanor, 46, for 23 years. Our story began when we were young, when we still believed that building a life together was enough to keep any storm at bay. We had Sophie, our eldest daughter, who turned 19 last spring, and Oliver, who recently turned 17. We were the typical family: weekends with BBQs, school homework, arguments over the garbage, and routines that, while not perfect, belonged to us. For years, Eleanor worked as a nurse at the county hospital, but she reduced her hours when the children were small and finally stopped working completely about 8 years ago. She told me she wanted to dedicate herself to the home and the kids, and I never argued with that. My salary was enough, and having her in charge of everything domestic made my life much easier. But everything changed one Tuesday afternoon. That day, while heading to a yoga class she had started taking, she crashed her car into a concrete barrier at nearly 60 miles per hour. The call came from the hospital where she used to work. A former colleague recognized her upon arrival. She had suffered multiple injuries, fractures, internal bleeding. She needed immediate surgery. I remember grabbing the keys and driving, breaking every speed limit imaginable. The doctors said she had been lucky. That word, lucky, sounded almost like a mockery. Her pelvis was shattered, ribs were broken, and she had a traumatic brain injury. Still, she was alive, and with enough rehabilitation she might walk again. That might floated in my head like a threat I couldn't ignore. I called the kids. Sophie drove from college and Oliver left school early. We spent hours, then days, in the hospital waiting room, hearing terms I never thought I'd hear: critical, unstable. We'll see how she evolves. On the 5th day, Eleanor opened her eyes. She was confused and sore, but alive. The relief made me feel like the floor disappeared under my feet. The medical expenses arrived before she left the ICU, and that's when I discovered what the word devastating truly means. Although we had insurance, the policy had a high deductible. It had always been enough because we had never faced anything serious. The cost of the accident was brutal: $7,000 for the ambulance and emergency room, $32,000 for the first surgery, $20,000 more for the second. ICU accumulating day after day. Rehabilitation, therapies, medication, checkups. In total, I found myself emptying our savings account, taking a loan from my retirement fund, using credit cards to the limit, and I never hesitated. She was my wife. She was the mother of my children. When someone you love is fighting to walk again, money ceases to exist. After 3 weeks, Eleanor returned home. I took a leave of absence from work to care for her full-time. I helped her get up, took her to the bathroom, cooked, organized her medications, and drove her to every physical therapy session. Sophie came home on weekends to help, and Oliver took charge after school. During the first month, Eleanor was grateful. She told me she didn't know how she would get through everything without me, but the rehabilitation was tough. Still, by the 6th week, she was walking inside the house without help, and by the 8th, she had almost recovered her normal mobility. And that's where the changes began. She became silent, distant. She spent hours sending messages. When I asked her who she was talking to, she said it was a support group for accident survivors. It seemed logical, so I didn't push. Then she started going out more often. First medical appointments, then coffees with friends, and later long meetings with people who supposedly belonged to that group. I supported her. I thought she needed to vent, to find people who understood what she had been through. Meanwhile, Sophie continued with college, Oliver with his school routine, and I returned to work to face the mountain of debt. But Eleanor wasn't the same. There was a coldness in the way she spoke, a calculated distance, an intention to push me away without saying it directly. After 23 years, I know her gestures, her way of being silent, her mood swings. This was not exhaustion or emotional aftermath of the accident. It was something else. I tried talking to her several times. She always replied that I was exaggerating or imagining things. 3 months after the accident, she could live her life without help. Medically, it was almost a miracle, but emotionally, It was as if she had returned as another person. And so, the day that confirmed everything arrived. 4 months after the accident, Eleanor requested a family meeting. It was Saturday. Sophie was home, and Oliver was in his room playing video games. She asked me to call him because she wanted to speak to everyone together. I thought it was about a medical result, some delayed effect, or perhaps she wanted to talk about the debt that was suffocating us. We sat in the living room. She looked too calm, which unsettled me. She started by saying that she had reflected on her life after the accident, that she had almost died, that in the hospital bed, she had thought about the experiences she had never had and everything she had sacrificed by marrying so young. And suddenly she dropped it. I want a divorce. The words hit me with a force I couldn't handle instantly. Sophie opened her mouth, unable to speak. Oliver looked up from his phone as if he had heard something impossible. I only managed to ask, "What?" She looked at me as if I were interrupting a decision that had been made a long time ago. "I want a divorce," she repeated with the same calm with which others order coffee. I never imagined hearing something like that inside my own home. Eleanor looked at me with a coldness I didn't recognize and released, without any tremor in her voice, "I can take care of myself now. I am recovered, and I have understood that I don't want to keep wasting my life in a marriage that doesn't fulfill me." The way she said, "wasting my life," pierced my chest. When I tried to respond, my voice came out higher than normal. "Wasting your life, Eleanor? What are you saying?" She took a deep breath, as if she had rehearsed every word. "I got married at 23. You have been the only man I have been with. I never had the chance to experience anything, to live the way I truly wanted. The accident opened my eyes. I am not going to settle for something that no longer makes me happy." That word, settle, burned inside me. I felt the floor move when I realized she was saying it in front of our children. I turned to them. Sophie was rigid, unsure where to look. Oliver wasn't blinking, as if trying to decipher if this was real. "Are you saying you want to destroy our family because you feel like you missed out on something?" I asked incredulously. "I am being honest about my needs," Eleanor replied, downplaying it. "I want to meet new people, go out, explore what the world has to offer. I have reached this point after everything I went through. I deserve it." I stared at her, looking for any trace of the woman I had cared for months. When she was hospitalized, when she couldn't get up alone, I was there. I paid every bill, coordinated every consultation, turned my savings into her recovery without a second thought. After spending all our savings for you to recover, after caring for you day and night, now you say you want to leave because you are well now? You decided that, she replied without batting an eye. I never asked you to do it. For a moment, no one spoke. Oliver watched his mother as if she were a stranger, and Sophie exchanged glances between us, her face tense. "Mom," Sophie said in a low voice, "where is all this coming from?" Eleanor tried to soften up just a little. "Honey, you are young. You will understand in time. Sometimes people change. The accident made me see that I don't have to stay in something that was extinguishing me." Sophie then looked at me. "So, you're just going to leave?" she asked her mother. "Your father will be fine," Eleanor replied. "But I need more than fine. I need excitement, to feel alive. I was on the brink of death. I am not going to spend what's left feeling trapped in the routine." Every word was like a punch. The way she erased us as if nothing we built mattered. I wanted Sophie to say something, to open her eyes to the absurdity, but instead, she turned to me. "Dad, are you being selfish?" I couldn't process it. "Sorry? Mom almost died. She has been fighting, and instead of supporting her, you make everything about yourself. As always." I felt an empty pit in my stomach. "Sophie, your mother just said in front of you that she wants to separate because she wants to explore other people. That was literal." "Stop exaggerating," she snapped. "Not everything is as dramatic as you say. She just wants to be happy. What's wrong with that? You should be mature enough to accept it without making a scene." It was as if I were the intruder in my own house, as if my daughter looked at me with a stranger's contempt. "Are you serious? Are you taking her side?" I asked. "There shouldn't be sides, Dad. This is part of Mom's recovery. You are the one complicating everything. It's exhausting. Exhausting, selfish, controlling. The words poured out of my daughter while Eleanor, without any shame, talked about divorce. Then Oliver suddenly stood up. You two are completely out of your minds, he blurted out, looking first at his mother. Mom, are you really doing this? Dad was with you every day. He went into debt for you, and now you're leaving because you want to go out with other men. Oliver, that's not true, Eleanor tried to interject. Yes, it is. That is exactly what you are saying. And you, he looked at Sophie, you are going to call Dad selfish? He is the one who has held this family together while Mom now wants to destroy it because she wants to live adventures. Don't talk to me like that, Sophie retorted, flushed. You don't understand anything. You're a kid. I understand that Mom is acting awfully, and you support her just because you are the same. Sophie stood up, her face red, trembling. Keep your nonsense, Oliver. Enough. Eleanor intervened, though without any real authority. She then looked at me as if I were responsible for the chaos. This was why I wanted to talk about it as a family. To move forward, to act like adults. I stood up. I noticed my hands trembling, but my voice was firm. You want to move forward? Perfect. You and Sophie can leave my house. Eleanor blinked. Excuse me? You heard me. You want a divorce? You want to experiment? You say you can fend for yourself? Then do it outside of here. Dad, Sophie tried. If you think your mother is right, if you think I am the problem, you can leave with her. You can't kick us out. Eleanor exclaimed. This is my house too. We will discuss that in the divorce. But today, you are leaving. The two of you pack your things and go. You are being a controller, Sophie said, bursting into tears. Just like Mom said. Then you should be happy to leave with her, I replied. Go. Accompany your mother while she builds her new life. I looked at Eleanor. You have an hour. Take what you need for a few days. The rest we will settle with lawyers. Oliver stood by my side, arms crossed. For the first time, I felt I was not completely alone. I watched Eleanor and Sophie leave that same night. I watched them pack their things while Sophie insulted me through sobs, and Eleanor looked at me as if I had destroyed something that she herself had dynamited. When the door finally closed, Oliver looked at me. Are you okay? No, I admitted, but I will be. That same night, after Oliver went to bed, I made a decision. If Eleanor wanted a divorce so suddenly, there had to be something more behind it. No one destroys 23 years of marriage without a reason. I went to the computer we shared, the one she used when her phone was charging, and I started to check. For a long time, I thought I knew every corner of the life Eleanor and I had built. I believed that despite our arguments, the difficult years, and the burdens we had both carried, there was a solid foundation to lean on. But that afternoon, sitting in front of her computer and seeing how she had left her session open without the slightest worry, I realized I had no idea who the woman I spent so many years with truly was. Finding the messages took less time than it takes a person to make coffee. 10 minutes, perhaps less. There were no complex passwords, no double verification, no precautions, as if it had never crossed her mind that I might see anything. That was the first thing that shocked me, not the content, but how little she cared to hide it. And upon entering her conversations, I knew why the name Kyle appeared again and again, like a shadow that was always there without my knowledge. According to what they said, they had met in her support group, something that seemed to have worked more as an excuse than as real therapy for her. It was evident that this space had become fertile ground for parallel relationships, and theirs had grown with an insulting speed. Going through the history, I understood that this was not a lapse or an impulsive affair. They had been exchanging messages for 3 months, right when Eleanor started pulling away from me with various pretexts, that she needed air, that she needed to feel alive, that she wanted to regain her independence. At the time, I thought these were emotional processes resulting from the accident, but now I understood she was preparing her farewell. What truly destroyed me was not the romantic messages, the photos they sent each other, or the innuendos. It was discovering that they had been designing, with almost surgical precision, every step to separate from me without leaving loose ends for weeks. The right time, how to manipulate the narrative, how to make me feel guilty. Everything was carefully outlined. There were messages that even today seem impossible for me to comprehend. One of them, sent by Eleanor 6 weeks earlier, clearly stated, "I am taking advantage of this recovery until there is nothing left to get. When the doctors discharge me and I can leave without remorse, I am leaving him. First, he has to pay for absolutely everything. I am not stupid." I read that text more than 10 times, trying to assimilate the level of strategy, the coldness hidden behind every word. 2 weeks earlier she had written another, "I can't believe he took out loans, emptied savings, and is paying every bill without questioning anything. It's pitiful. I should feel guilty, but honestly, I always thought of him as a backup plan. I need that money for what's next." Kyle enthusiastically replied, as if celebrating a victory, "You are right. Take advantage of what you can, and then disappear. That guy lives to please, he won't even understand what happened." And Eleanor, as if talking about the weather, concluded, "I know perfectly well who he is. He serves his purpose while it lasts. When I get discharged, I won't even look back. I've already lost too many years pretending to love someone who isn't worth anything." I stood motionless, feeling my world split in two. Everything I had done for her, the sleepless nights at the hospital, the exhaustion, the loans I took out, the times I gave up buying something for myself because that money could help her, was reduced to a simple calculation in her head. Every gesture I thought meant something to both of us was ultimately just a tool she used brazenly while building a parallel life. There were photos, videos, even conversations about moving, financial statements, shared expenses, travel routes they wanted to take together once she was discharged. Kyle, recently divorced and with some money, was the future Eleanor was so interested in. I, meanwhile, was her bridge, her means, her emotional and economic ATM. I took screenshots of absolutely everything, not for revenge at that moment, but because I needed proof that I wasn't losing my mind. I needed to confirm that what I was seeing wasn't an exaggeration due to shock. I saved every piece of evidence, messages, photos, conversations, dates, even screenshots of Kyle's profile to have the complete thread. And then I took a deep breath and made the second most important decision of that week, to check our finances. I knew we had a joint account, but I also remembered that Eleanor had always maintained her personal account, the one she claimed was her emotional security. I never questioned it. It seemed healthy that we each had independence, but what I found made me realize that I had been the only one sustaining the house while she accumulated a nest egg to escape. Among her things, I found her bank statements neatly organized in folders, easily accessible to anyone. She never suspected I would check anything. There it was, $30,000 in her personal account. Money she never touched, not even when I had to take out loans to pay for her surgeries, therapies, and medical consultations. While I emptied my savings and juggled my credit cards, she saved without any remorse. The anger that invaded me was not overwhelming. I didn't yell, I didn't break anything. It was a glacial coldness that swept through my body, an almost painful clarity. Eleanor had been using me since the first day after the accident. There was no love, no gratitude, only calculation. On Monday morning, without hesitation, I scheduled an appointment with a lawyer, and there, as we talked, I realized something I had completely erased from my memory, the prenuptial agreement. Eleanor had insisted on signing it before we got married to protect her parents' inheritance. I, being in love, accepted. I had nothing to hide or protect. That agreement stated that what was hers, and what was mine, except for one forgotten clause. If either party committed adultery, the agreement was completely annulled, and everything was divided equally. My lawyer mentioned it with professional calmness, but for me, it was the equivalent of all the pieces of a puzzle fitting together simultaneously. Eleanor's strategy, designed to protect her money, was reversed thanks to her own betrayal. "Present everything," I said without trembling. "I want the lawsuit, the inventory of assets, the formal petition, everything. I want them to serve the documents before Friday." Before I left, the lawyer asked about Sophie. "My daughter is over 18, I replied, But I want to update my will. I want to remove her completely. Is it legal? It is, he confirmed. And we will draft a clause so she cannot contest it. Perfect. Everything will go to Oliver. I left the office feeling, for the first time in months, like the owner of my own life. On Thursday, she was finally served. Eleanor was staying with Sophie in an apartment they were sharing. I knew this because Oliver, who still tried to talk to his sister, told me. He tried to convince her to see the reality, but she seemed to have blindly adopted her mother's version. 30 minutes after receiving the papers, Eleanor called me. I let the call go to voicemail. Henry, what is this? Why are you alleging adultery? You want to annul the prenup? This is crazy. Call me right now. We need to talk. I deleted it without listening twice. Then she called again and again. Then it was Sophie. I blocked the notifications. That night, Oliver showed up at my door, worried and exhausted. Sophie says you are falsely accusing Mom, he murmured. There is nothing false. I have proof of everything. I know, he admitted. I told her. She doesn't want to listen. I leaned against the table, taking a deep breath. That is not my problem anymore. Oliver hesitated, as if anticipating what was coming next. She asked if you were willing to talk to her. No, I replied bluntly. He looked at me with a mixture of sadness and resignation. Dad, you have always been with me. But Sophie, she made her decision. And now she must face the consequences, I interrupted. Soon after, Oliver watched me with concern one afternoon upon returning from school. He dropped his backpack on the floor and took a deep breath before speaking. What happened? I asked. Sophie found out about the will, he replied, visibly nervous. I wasn't surprised, although the speed with which it happened was. How did she find out? Mom told her. The lawyer sent the financial documentation, and the copy of the new will was inside. Sophie called me very upset. What exactly did she say? That you can't do that to her, that she's your daughter, and that you're punishing her for supporting Mom. She says it's not fair. And is she planning something? Oliver shrugged. She didn't want to tell me anything concrete, but when she called me, she was talking to Mom. They both seemed very upset. 3 days later, the doorbell rang. Opening the door, I found 2 officers, a man and a woman, both with professional and serious expressions. Are you the owner of the house? The male officer asked. Yes. Is something wrong? We need to ask you some questions about a complaint that was filed. Can we come in? A weight dropped in my stomach, though I tried to keep my expression neutral. What kind of complaint? Domestic violence, the female officer replied. Your daughter claims that you physically assaulted your wife during her recovery after the accident. I stood motionless for a few seconds, unable to process it. When I could finally speak, I said it without trembling. That is completely false. My wife and I are in the process of divorce. This is retaliation. The officers came in, sat with me in the living room, and began asking questions about Eleanor's recovery, our relationship, and whether I had ever acted physically or aggressively. I answered calmly, detailing everything. When they asked for proof of where I was on the dates mentioned, I took out my phone and showed them my work schedule, the recorded work hours, the medical and therapy appointments that I myself had driven Eleanor to, and the records of the family leave requested to care for her. I also have all the clinical reports, I added. Checkups, physical therapy, controls. If there had been any kind of abuse, the doctors would have detected it. They documented everything. The officers exchanged a glance. We will have to continue with the process, the officer said. But we appreciate your cooperation. As soon as they left, I called my lawyer. Sophie filed a complaint saying I abused Eleanor during her recovery. What? He said, incredulous. Did she talk to the police already? Yes. They came. I showed them everything. Work records, medical documentation, schedule. This not only complicates the divorce, he replied, hardening his voice, but it is also a crime. If she did it to influence the process, it's even more serious. You can prove she is lying. Oliver was here the whole time. He can testify. I never laid a finger on Eleanor. Perfect. We are also going to request the medical records from the hospital and all her therapy sessions. If there had been abuse, it would be documented. What doesn't exist speaks in your favor. The police investigation became a torment. Several statements, interviews with Oliver, delivery of financial documentation that demonstrated every payment I made for Eleanor's care. Oliver was impeccable. He explained how I was present every day, how he had never seen a single aggressive gesture toward his mother. Sophie is lying, he declared to the detectives. She's angry because Dad cut her out of the will. It's revenge. The police also interrogated Sophie and Eleanor. A week later, my lawyer received the transcripts. From the first question, Sophie's story crumbled. She claimed everything happened one Tuesday night, but I was working until 8:30, people could confirm it. She said she witnessed assaults during several weekends, but she only came home on some weekends, and I had the proof of the medical appointments I took Eleanor to write on those days. There was no clinical record with signs of violence. When it was Eleanor's turn, she backed up every one of Sophie's lies, even when the detectives showed that the dates didn't match and that the medical reports contradicted her statement. That's when I understood that they had planned it together, mother and daughter attempting to ruin me to preserve an inheritance. It hurts to discover that your own daughter would be willing to destroy your reputation or even risk you going to prison just to get money. 2 days later, my lawyer called me again. Oliver showed me something important, he said. Sophie's old laptop, the one she left at your house. He was using it for schoolwork, and she didn't close her message session. He found complete conversations with Eleanor. There were messages from the moment Sophie discovered the change in the will. We have to do something about Dad. I have an idea. 3 days later, Sophie filed the complaint. My lawyer printed everything, but the most revealing was one exchange. After filing the report, Eleanor wrote, "Do you think this will be enough to get his money?" Sophie replied, "It has to be. I'm not going to lose everything because he's being difficult." They wrote it down, black on white. The investigation ended, and the case was passed to the prosecutor's office. 3 weeks later, the prosecutor reviewed the evidence and decided to press charges, filing a false report, conspiracy, possible obstruction of justice. For the divorce, that destroyed all credibility for both of them. The police will close the violence investigation, my lawyer explained. There is no proof. The statements contradict each other, and there is evidence of coordination. We will make sure the divorce judge sees every document. The hearing was scheduled 3 weeks later. When my lawyer filed the motion to include the police investigation in the divorce file, his strategy was clear: to demonstrate, beyond a doubt, who Eleanor really was and how she behaved when she thought no one was looking. He prepared an extensive folder with reports, transcripts, and screenshots, all properly organized so the judge could trace the chain of decisions Eleanor had made step by step. Her lawyer, for his part, tried to stop it from the first minute. He alleged that the evidence was highly prejudicial and had no direct relationship with marital matters. According to him, introducing that material would only serve to paint his client in a bad light. But when the judge took the documents and began reviewing them, the atmosphere immediately tensed. It took no more than a few minutes for her to read the messages between Eleanor and Sophie and examine the inconsistencies in their stories. Finally, she looked up, completely serene, and said, "The evidence is admitted. This information goes directly to the character and credibility of the parties involved. It stays." From that moment on, I knew the course of the trial had changed. The morning of the hearing, I arrived early. I sat next to my lawyer, took a deep breath, and tried to remain calm. When Eleanor entered with her legal representative, I knew she was nervous by the way she avoided looking at me. There was no greeting or the slightest attempt at eye contact. She simply turned her head and sat rigidly as if she wished everything would end quickly. Sophie did not attend. Her own lawyer had advised her to stay away from the court because there was a real possibility she would face criminal charges. That detail spoke for itself. The process lasted 2 long hours, although it felt much longer in my head. My lawyer presented a complete narrative. He recounted the beginning of the affair with Kyle. He showed the messages where Eleanor admitted she had used me for economic convenience. He presented the bank statements where it was clear how my savings were being consumed while hers remained intact. And he meticulously reconstructed the timeline that demonstrated Eleanor planned to leave me even before she recovered her health. Up to that point, it was already devastating. But what truly sealed the case was the moment he brought the false police report before the judge. Eleanor's lawyer stood up and tried to block it with a theatrical speech. The judge interrupted him before he finished his argument. "Objection denied," she said without raising her voice. "Continue." My lawyer described the situation without exaggeration, in a sober but firm tone. "Your Honor, here we see a repeated pattern of manipulation. Mrs. Eleanor allowed her husband to deplete his resources to keep her alive while she was already planning to leave. When he discovered the infidelity and filed for divorce, she supported her daughter in fabricating a false complaint with the aim of ruining his credibility. This is not an impulsive mistake. It is systematic conduct to avoid facing the consequences of her actions." The judge turned to Eleanor. "Do you have anything to say?" Her lawyer spoke again, alleging flaws in the investigation and justifying Sophie's concerns. The judge reviewed the transcription aloud. "Did you ask if a false police report would be enough to obtain your father's money? That does not describe concern, that describes deliberate fraud." The silence that followed was absolute. Eleanor's lawyer gave up and sat down. After silently reviewing the documents for another 15 minutes, the judge delivered the sentence. The divorce is granted. The prenuptial agreement is annulled due to adultery. All marital assets will be divided equally under state laws. This includes Mrs. Eleanor's private savings. Regarding Oliver, due to his age, his expressed preference, and the mother's pattern of conduct, it is recognized that he will reside full-time with his father until he reaches the age of majority. Furthermore, Mrs. Eleanor must reimburse Mr. Miller half of the medical expenses resulting from her recovery. The dissolution will be formalized within 90 days. Case adjourned. Eleanor stood up as if propelled by a spring. "This is absolutely unfair." The judge responded with an iron calm. "Sit down, Mrs. Eleanor. This court has considered your conduct, especially the participation in coordinated false accusations. Any related criminal matter will be handled in separate proceedings." Her lawyer took her arm and forced her to sit down. I simply observed her for a few seconds before leaving, certain that for the first time in a long time, reality had prevailed over her manipulated version of events. I walked out of that room with everything that was legally mine: my house, half of the secret savings she had tried to hide, full custody of my son, and an order for a $30,000 reimbursement. 90 days later, the divorce was officially closed. By then, I already had a hunch I couldn't ignore. So I continued investigating Kyle, the man Eleanor had bet her future on. What I found exceeded all expectations. Kyle had a wife, not an ex-wife. A legal, current wife, living with him under the same roof while they worked on their relationship. Eleanor didn't know, or didn't want to see it. My instinct told me something was wrong, so I started reviewing what I could: public records, social profiles, old photos. I found pictures of Kyle's wedding uploaded just 3 years ago, recent family photos taken 8 months ago, and his wife's name on the house deed. The evidence was so obvious that only someone as blinded as Eleanor would have believed the stories he told. I meticulously gathered everything: screenshots of Eleanor's conversations, hotel receipts hidden among our accounts, a timeline comparing the separation he alleged with the actual dates of the affair. Then I drafted a brief, precise email. "I think you should know what your husband has been doing. Proof attached. Good luck." 3 days later, she filed for divorce, and unlike Eleanor, that woman didn't hesitate for a second to protect her interests. She took absolutely everything: the house, the vehicles, the business assets. Kyle went from living comfortably to having to sleep on someone else's sofa while trying to piece his life back together. And with that, Eleanor's great romantic escape was destroyed. She had gambled her marriage, her economic stability, and her reputation for a man who ended up homeless and broke. Oliver told me how the rest unfolded. He heard it from Sophie, and Sophie had heard it directly from Eleanor. Apparently, Eleanor and Kyle had decided to take some time to think things through. The truth was that neither of them had any money. Eleanor had temporarily moved into Sophie's apartment. The problem was obvious. Sophie was a college student with a part-time job. She could barely support herself, much less an adult without income, accustomed to spending as if she still had a stability that no longer existed. Eleanor had burned through almost all the economic settlement she received in the separation. Expensive clothes, a new car, dinners, impulsive purchases, ridiculous attempts to impress Kyle when she still thought he was her ticket out. She ended up without savings, without a partner, without a home, and without a reputation. And then the inevitable arrived. The prosecutor's office filed formal charges against both of them for the false police report. Sophie was charged with filing a false report and obstruction. Eleanor also received a charge of conspiracy. They accepted plea deals to avoid something worse: community service, fines, probation. But the worst was not the punishment. It was the record. Both were left with a criminal record, and Sophie's university found out. It was only a matter of time before everything they had tried to fabricate against me turned completely against them. The disciplinary process the university opened after the charges moved faster than expected. Once the messages and the agreement with the prosecutor's office came to light, her scholarship was revoked, and she was suspended for violating the student code of conduct. Without that economic support and unable to rely on my help anymore, returning to study became impossible for her. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, Eleanor appeared at my house without warning. I was alone. Oliver had gone out to see a friend when I heard the doorbell. I looked through the peephole and recognized her instantly. The wear of the last few months was evident. She looked more exhausted, older, as if 5 years had been added to her face overnight. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. "Hello," she murmured, almost a whisper. "What do you want, Eleanor? Can we talk, please?" "Just a few minutes." I took a deep breath, stepped out onto the porch, and closed the door behind me. I wasn't going to let her into my home again. "I made a mistake," she said immediately, her eyes welling up. "Everything that happened wasn't when I was at my best. The accident confused me, it left me out of my mind. I don't know what I was thinking." "You know what you were thinking," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "You thought you could use me to pay for your recovery and then leave with another man. That is exactly what you were thinking. I know it looks that way." "No, Eleanor. It doesn't just look that way. That's what you did. I know because I have the messages. You planned every step." She was already crying. "I'm sorry. I hurt you. I know. I was wrong. But right now, I'm going through a rough time. I thought maybe we could, I don't know, try to fix it." "You want to come back to me?" I asked bluntly. She nodded with a look that once might have moved me, but now only produced weariness. "No," I replied without hesitation. "Please, I'm really struggling. Kyle is gone. Sophie can barely support herself. I have nowhere to go. You have $15,000. I already spent most of it. That is not my problem. Besides, you have a car and a nursing degree. You can get by. How can you be so cold after everything we went through?" I laughed. I literally let out a laugh. "Are you seriously asking me that? I spent my savings to save your life. While I was doing that, you were planning to leave with someone else. You announced the divorce in front of our children, turned our daughter against me, and then claimed that I was a waste of time. And now you are surprised that I am cold?" I said I was sorry. "And I don't care. You made your decision. You wanted to explore, to live, not to waste your time with me. Then do that, but do it away from my house. And where am I supposed to go? I don't care in the slightest. Call Kyle, Sophie, or your friends from the support group, but stop calling me. It's over, Eleanor." When I turned toward the door, I heard, "What about the kids? Won't you try for them?" I stopped for a moment. "Oliver is inside. You can have a relationship with him if he wishes, but you and I will never be together again. Accept it." I went inside and closed the door, watching through the window as she stood there crying on the porch for a while before leaving. I felt no guilt whatsoever. 2 weeks later, the story repeated itself, but this time with someone I truly hurt to see in that situation. Sophie. The same doorbell, the same check through the peephole, And yet, I opened the door with my face as neutral as I could manage. "Hello, Dad," she said, her voice trembling. "Sophie, can I come in?" "No." Her expression broke. "Please, I need to talk to you." "Then talk. I want to apologize for everything. For what I said, for having supported Mom, for the complaint, for everything. I was wrong." "It's all right," I replied without adding anything else. She seemed to be expecting a hug, an absolution, something. Since I said nothing, she continued. "And about the inheritance, Dad, please. I know I made mistakes, but I'm still your daughter. You are an adult who made adult decisions. You called me selfish and controlling for not supporting your mother's infidelity. You filed a false police report against me. You chose her side. Now you face the consequences. I didn't know about the infidelity at the time." "Yes, you did. I told you at the family meeting, and you didn't care because you were too busy defending her." Tears rolled down her face. "I can't do it alone, Dad. Mom is overwhelmed. I can't afford the apartment. I lost the scholarship. College is very expensive. You're 19. Get a job. Apply for student loans. Do what millions of young people do. Are you going to abandon me? Your daughter?" she asked in a broken voice, clinging to the last shred of compassion she thought existed between us. I looked at her without looking away, not with anger, but with a clarity that took months to achieve. "I am not abandoning you, Sophie. What I am doing is treating you like the adult you claimed to be when you decided to support every one of your mother's decisions. You said I should get over it, that I was exaggerating. Well, this is what taking adult choices means. You earned this yourself." She blinked in disbelief. "And what am I supposed to do now? I can't pay for college. I can't pay the rent." Her voice cracked with every word. "You always took care of that. And I did that while you were a minor under my responsibility," I replied firmly. "But you no longer evaluate anything from that place. You distanced yourself from me when I needed you most, and you also lent yourself to manipulate a legal process that you knew could ruin me. That is not what a daughter who wants support does. That is what a person who took sides does. And you took sides without hesitation." "I never thought you would take away the help for college," she murmured as if the whole world were crumbling around her. "The tuition that was going to you will now go to Oliver," I explained without softening the phrase. "He didn't turn his back on me, he didn't try to hurt me, and he continues to behave like someone who values having me in his life." "Dad," she tried to say, as if that single word could erase months of insults and impulsive decisions. "Sophie, life doesn't work like that. And I tell you this without anger. You chose to believe your mother even when you had proof of what she was doing. You called me controlling, selfish, cruel. You wanted to see me as the villain because it was more comfortable than accepting the truth. And now you are surprised that I am not sustaining you as before." She tried to move closer, but I raised a hand to stop her. "You need to face the consequences of your decisions. The same thing you demanded of me when you asked me to be mature. Well, here is the maturity. This is the result." She stepped back, defeated. "There really is no turning back. Regarding your life, you can rebuild it. You can work, study, apply for scholarships, whatever you want, but as for my financial support and your presence under my roof, no. That chapter is closed." She pursed her lips as if she wanted to say something more, but found no words. She just stood there, trembling, with tears streaming down her face, without trying to stop them. "I can't believe you're doing this," she whispered. "You are living it because you decided it. And I am sorry for you, but I am not going to rescue you from something you yourself caused. Now, please go." I opened the door and calmly pointed outside, without raising my voice. Sophie watched me for a few more seconds, as if waiting for me to regret it at the last moment. When she understood it wouldn't happen, she turned around and slowly walked down the steps, her shoulders slumped. I closed the door behind her and leaned my hand on the wood for just an instant, listening to her footsteps fade away. There was no resentment in my thoughts, only a tranquil firmness I had never felt before. It was the first time in months that I allowed myself to breathe without guilt. I went upstairs to the living room and found Oliver watching me from the hallway, serious, almost assessing if I was okay. "Dad, am I all right?" "Yes," I replied. And this time, I said it with absolute honesty. And for the first time in a long time, I truly mean it. He nodded, understanding more than he was saying. That night, I slept without a weight on my chest, aware that I had finally closed a door that I would never have to open again.